Well, hazing is a practice that we all condemn, and it is something that worries all university leaders. And honestly, it worries us both as leaders of universities, but as parents as well. And none of us want to receive a phone call at 3 a.m. informing us of trauma or death of a loved one. And we're fortunate at Kent State in that in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had no incidents of significant hazing. And yet, tomorrow morning at 3 a.m., I could receive that phone call. And I would find that devastating as the leader of a university. And not to mention if I were that parent receiving that phone call. And so we're all very supportive as university presidents of the legislation that's making its way through the state legislature to criminalize hazing, to make it into a felony under certain circumstances. And all of us support the governor's condemnation of this activity and this behavior.
President Diacon, the governor's office had issued a notice that he was going to be talking with university presidents. Did you have that call already, and how did it go?
We did. We spoke. The presidents of the public universities in the state of Ohio spoke with Governor DeWine this morning. And look, my ongoing impression of Governor DeWine is he is an especially empathetic individual and who cares greatly about the health and well-being of all the residents of his state, of our state. And he said something along the lines of what I said earlier, which is, as leaders, we all condemn this behavior. And as parents, many of us are parents, we don't want to get that call at 3 a.m. We don't want anyone else to receive that call at 3 a.m.
Okay, we would take some questions from the media. I want to start with our student media. Melissa Myers from TV2, do you have a question for President Diacon?
I do not right now, but I will get back to you if I do.
Okay, Melissa, thank you. Gianna, do you have a question for the president?
Yeah. For Greek life and policies on campus for, not having hazing, how have they evolved over the years and how at Kent State here?
So here's the thing about hazing as a practice and an attitude. I mean, it's behavioral, and it's behavioral that's based on culture and history. And so the way that we address that is with education. And so we continue to work to educate our students about this scourge. We do so in our first year experience courses for our freshmen. We do so at our summer orientation, and we particularly do so with our sorority and fraternity leaders who embrace that message as well. And so it's really about education.
Did you have another question, Gianna?
Sure. So how do you and FSL collab on the matters regarding Greek life here at Kent State and hazing?
Well, we're really fortunate to have the leadership that we do with Vice President Lamar Hilton. And certainly he takes that aspect of his job very seriously. And I can tell you that when any harm comes to any of our students in any circumstances, we feel that personally, and we are committed to addressing it professionally.
Thank you. Ian Jameson. Ian, do you have a question for President Diacon?
Yes, thank you. I know that you said earlier that there hasn't been any known hazing incidents in the past 4 to 5 years. Are there going to be any actions taken with Greek life to review their hazing policies in spite of the events that have transpired?
Well, I know that Vice President Hilton and his team are always in contact with student leaders of all of our student organizations. And I'm sure they'll turn this into another opportunity to do that kind of educating that we all want to do.
Ian, do you have another question?
Yes, I just have one more. I know that in a lot of Greek life, there's historical initiation procedures that come down from national level. I know that most, if not all of them are, approved or vetted, especially by the higher ups, but will any legislation or local ruling or local decision-making impact those at all?
Well, right now, I'm really prepared to speak to the legislation at the state level that's making its way through the state legislature. And this morning, the presidents of the Ohio public universities, as I said, we met with Governor DeWine, and certainly we are unanimously in support of that legislation.
Thank you. Round robin now. Will Ewick, Channel 3, do you have a question?
I do. Based on that conversation with the governor today, was it more about him gauging your interest and the other president's interest in backing that legislation, or was he calling on you guys to take a specific type of action?
I think the tone and the tenor of the conversation with the governor today was really about our commitment as leaders to eradicating anything, and in this case in particular, hazing that causes harm to our people. I mean, if you think about the governor's approach to governing during the COVID-19 pandemic, he is so laser focused on the health and safety of Ohioans. And so I think it was only part of his character and his way of governing that he would ask to speak with us today.
Did he speak at all to the urgency of that legislation? I know that, Collins Law was introduced a couple of years ago after what happened at Ohio University. It kind of ran out of time in the state Senate, and now they're working on this kind of revamped version of it. Did he talk a little at all about how quickly he expects that to move?
We did not go into any specifics about the legislative process. We did talk about the fact that there are roughly 11 or 12 other states that have this kind of legislation in place already, and that it's time for Ohio to have it as well.
Thank you. Moving forward, Taylor Haggerty. Taylor, do you have a question for President Diacon?
No, I don't, but thanks.
Okay. Taylor, thank you so much. Kevin Freeman, Fox 8, do you have a question for the president?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, how often are there regular conversations with fraternities and sororities on campus about hazing, or is it just a known policy, or is there continuous dialogue about it?
Now, we engage consistently with student leaders about hazing. We do so with our entire student body when they come onto campus before their freshman year for summer orientation. We do so throughout their first semester as freshmen in their first year experience seminars. And then our vice president for student affairs and our dean of students in particular meet consistently with our student leaders, including sorority and fraternity leaders. And hazing is always part of that conversation.
You said it's been about 4 or 5 years since there's been a significant hazing incident. Are there any fraternities or sororities that are currently banned or under some type of discipline now because of that hazing incident? And do you know what that incident was about?
So Eric can give you any follow-up information on that by talking with Vice President Lamar Hilton. We would have hoped to have had him on this call, but he's leading another committee that's meeting at this moment. But certainly Eric can follow up with Vice President Hilton.
Okay.
Anything else, Kevin?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Jennifer with the Akron Beacon Journal. Hi, Jennifer. Do you have a question for the president?
I do. Thank you. I was really big on the screen there. I wanted to ask about how, obviously this is a question that you have with your campus every year. How would this law change those conversations? How would it give you another tool in the belt to address this issue? What would be the benefit? How would it change what you do on campus?
Well, I would suggest that you talk to the legal experts about the mechanisms that'll be in this new legislation. My understanding is that it will be written in such a way that makes it more appropriate for prosecutors to pursue cases. It opens a pathway for pursuing those cases that may not exist currently. I'm not an expert on those legal matters, but my understanding is, as it was explained to me, is that this proposed legislation facilitates prosecuting in these cases in a way that's not facilitated under current legislation.
I just wonder if that, being able to have that, does that get at that behavioral piece that when you have a significant consequence like that, is that what you're hoping happens? That this, you know, when it's this explicit and clear about what the consequences could be, not only death, but jail time or prison, or that will get at that sort of cultural issue and behavioral issue and drive that point home?
I think certainly stronger legislation counteracting hazing is one more exceptionally important tool in our tool belt for addressing this issue, but it's not the panacea. It is a behavior. It's a behavior that's reflected in a history and in a culture. And so those have to be addressed through consistent and constant educational communications and interactions.
Jen, thank you. Emily Bamforth, cleveland.com. Emily, if you have a question, go ahead.
Sure, hello. So could you speak a little bit about two different things? The first one is, as previously mentioned, a version of this stalled in Senate committee last year. Do you believe that there is the momentum based on the governor's call with the other presidents to get this through this year?
What I can say is that there's the public university presidents in Ohio unanimously express their support for this legislation. I would hope that that will enter into the discussions in Columbus. And again, we think it would be an important addition to what we can do to curb this behavior.
And my second question is, outside of criminalization, between the case that sparked Collins Law and this situation, is there anything else that you guys discussed outside of that criminalization, a best practice or something else that might help every campus out in this situation? Any additional initiatives or policies?
Well, again, it's about education. And we did not discuss specific approaches that we each have on our campuses. I suspect in the future we'll begin to have that conversation. Criminalization alone isn't going to stamp out any behavior, and it's not going to eradicate this behavior. And that's why we really have to commit to consistent and powerful messaging and use our positions as leaders of higher educational institutions to engage in that and lead that dialogue.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think everybody's had a chance for at least one question, so I'll just throw it out to the group. Are there any remaining questions? Just go ahead and identify yourself and speak. Going once. If not, President Diacon, if you could just close it and then maybe share how you believe flashes, take care of flashes applies for situations like this.
Each university leader is absolutely committed to the safety and well-being of all of those in our community, our employees and our students. And any behavior, any activity that subjects those individuals to harm is an anathema to all of us. And we look forward to addressing this issue going forward with a combination of a state law, if that is to happen, and ongoing educational activities.
President Diacon, thank you so much. To the media, thank you so much. I'll have a link to this in a matter of minutes for those of you who need to download it. If not, have a great day. This concludes our press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.